Love it. And I love like the idea of like being able to represent yourself and seeing yourself represented, not only through art, but also just in more everyday life scenarios.
Mhm.
Like, hello.
Hello, that sums it up. Just a deep breath.
A deep breath. We are okay.
We are making it. How are you doing?
I am doing all right. Still trying to draw all of the good vibes that I can from the Supreme Court Justice Brown. All of it.
Yay. I know. There was like a moment where it's like, this is the part of history that I like. These are the positive times.
I was just like, I just kept watching Senator Booker. It was Senator Booker, right? That was like just gushing over her. And I was just like, my heart.
He's such a passionate man. I'm a big fan.
I know. Twitter is fire.
Yeah, he does have a really good Twitter account. Yeah, certainly something very positive. Just amazing to watch the Honorable Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Jackson. That's fantastic.
It's I want to cry. I'm gonna cry. Also, it's been a dramatic week for me, so I'm gonna like cry everything. Cried to my therapist this morning. Cried to my dad earlier. He broke his phone by like slamming it into the door of a van. So like, it's okay. Everything's fine.
It's just a lot of things happening at one time.
We're doing great. We are here to talk about hood feminism, and we are here to talk about just incredible things that women have done for feminism, some not so incredible things that women have done for feminism, and some every in between things.
Yes, for sure. She covers all of that in these next two chapters. So definitely excited to talk about them.
Yeah. You ready? All right. Yeah. So these chapters were titled How to Write About Black Women and Pretty for a ...
Two very interesting chapters.
Yes. What are your initial thoughts about how to write a Black woman?
Well, at first she starts by talking about what is currently done. And I didn't know that's what she was talking about. I thought she was giving advice. And then I was like, wow, this is getting like really, this is getting really offensive. She was saying things like how you write about Black women's personal lives, but not really understanding what that has to do with the public and not really caring that it's personal lives being made public and just things like that. So it was like an attention grabbing beginning for sure, but I really enjoyed it. I mean, one thing that I think she covered very heavily was respectability and respectability politics, which I thought was fantastic. I just thought she summed it up really well. It's all political, and if it's political in this culture, in this country, in this world, then that's like anti-Black.
Yeah. Like so many aspects of respectability go into, like, people call it like respectability politics, and like just I would like to think of it more as like a respectability society where we're all thinking in this preconceived, respectable, quote unquote, like big arching, overbearing idea of respectability over our heads. And that's automatically geared towards whiteness because of imperialism, colonization. Like whenever we talk about respectability politics, for some reason, the Crown Act came into my head about women being able to wear their hair in the workforce and in school.
Yeah.
And
yeah, the Crown Act I think is a perfect example because it just talks about like how people are allowed to just show up, and some people can just show up as they are with their hair in ponytails or their hair down, and some people can't show up as they are. And I think I'm glad you brought that up because that's certainly a good example of what she was talking about all throughout. I think How to Work or How to Write About Black Women, also pretty fora.
like, it's just, it blows my mind that in the year of our Lord 2022, we just now passed something like the Crown Act, and it has to be there in place as a protection of women's hairstyles because someone thought to attack that. Like, we have to actually have an actual law in place to protect women's hairstyles.
I don't know if it might be pretty for ... I'll double check, but Mikki Kendall talks about how in Florida, they passed this law where it's okay I'm going to check to make sure it's Florida, but I'm pretty sure it's Florida. It's okay to discriminate against people with locks because locks is a hairstyle that can be changed. Therefore, it's not discrimination. And I was just like so confused because in order for this to be passed, they had to recognize that there was a difference of treating of people with locks, but then they decided somehow that that's not discrimination. And I just don't understand.
And we look at the people deciding this, and it's probably people that don't have locks.
Most definitely. It does not say Florida. It just says the U.S. 11th Circuit Court ruled. So
11th Circuit Court. I'm going to look it up because I know that I think 9th Circuit Court is California.
Okay.
This just like, yeah.
None of that made sense to me.
Georgia.
Wow. Okay. That's shocking. I definitely expected it to be Florida.
Oh, come on, Georgia. Oh, people have been working hard in Georgia, like really working hard. Like this last election, Stacey Abrams, gotta appreciate.
We love her.
Everything. Just saw that she announced her candidacy for, was it governor? Let me see. It was on Twitter. Basically, we should just do a bonus episode on all of the amazing people that we follow on Twitter.
I think between you and me, it's a star cast of people we follow.
Oh yeah, candidate for governor.
Yay! Go. And I mean, they talk about how we would not have had Supreme Court, the Honorable Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown. Is it Brown Jackson or Jackson Brown? Yeah, just like peak.
I'm looking it up because I was just like, I know those names are in there, and I'm just like, I should be like,
it's Brown Jackson.
Brown Jackson.
I mix it up too. It's two last names, so it trips me up sometimes. But anyway, the Honorable Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, which I will say every single time, one of the reasons she was able to be brought into the Supreme Court was because Georgia was able to flip 2 Senate seats. So like all of that Stacey Abrams, whom we love, all of that advocacy and all of that work on behalf of people and like voter suppression. Look what happened. Amazing things happened.
Amazing things happen when the groundwork can be done, and it can be like the groundwork can be laid, and then we have the Honorable Justice
every single time.
a t-shirt.
It's exciting. So we could definitely, I mean, it's unfortunate. I think this is the overall theme throughout this podcast as well. It's unfortunate that there has to be so much advocacy for human rights, as in like voting is supposed to be something we all have access to. But you see what happens when you have those grassroots organizations. You see what happens when you have organizing. Good things happen.
And like, to go on the opposite side of that, like whenever people are like, why wasn't grassroots here before? And I was just like, hello. Racism.
Now why?
There was a point about 100 years ago that women couldn't get a bank account. All right. Much less a woman of color. So let's just say we're working on it.
It feels like there's this misconception that people have just allowed oppression to happen. And it's like totally erasing all of the pushback that our ancestors had, you know, just because things happened the way they did. It wasn't for a lack of trying. It's not like people weren't pushing back and like fighting for their rights. It's, like you said, racism, white supremacy, like those things play a role.
Like white supremacy, racism, violence, intimidation. Like we forget that these components of racism, like violence is a giant component of it. Violence, genocide, literal like mass murders. Like those are not small things to just like brush to the side and be like, oh, just ignore it, like brush it off. You can go and still fight the oppression. Not when you're getting murdered for it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I definitely appreciated about this chapter. Mikki Kendall just really talks about the contradiction within society of we like this, but then we like really beat people up when this happens, and how there's contradictions all throughout society, especially when we're talking about equal rights or equity.
It really makes me want to just chew on this microphone. I'm not even joking. Like,
yeah, it's exhausting and frustrating, certainly.
And like, I think also going into like what respectability does, it starts like the concept of respectability, it starts so young. Like I'm thinking like 3-year-olds in school when kids are told to behave a certain way, listen to your teacher, but some like teachers go with like the whole like corporal punishment route is still legal in some states. Like, and we have data that shows racial bias in disciplinary actions within the school system. So like this stuff, it's ingrained in us from a very young age. And then by the other side of that, as women of color, like we're sitting there going like, all right, we've been like shoved down and told to be respectable, quote unquote, and now you're mad at us for not stirring up more trouble. We've already seen what happens when we stir up trouble. It's people in power abusing such power, and then it's just a huge like dumpster fire.
Yes, absolutely a dumpster fire. That sums it up perfectly well. It's such a contradiction of, if people have what they need, there's not trouble being like uprising and people fighting for what they need. But if people don't have what they need, then people are they're criticized for not fighting for what they need. So what is even happening?
People can't win. That's the way that the system works. That's the way that oppression works, is it just keeps people down no matter what way they do it. If they try to play by the rules, they are blocked on X, Y, and Z. If they try to work outside of the system, they're saying they're not playing by the rules. Well, the rules were not made for them. That's like something that we've been talking about this entire time. We're living in a society that was not built for us. So we're trying to change that society. and everything is on fire as a result.
I pulled up this quote from Mikki Kendall about respectability politics. She says, respectability politics are really about controlling group behavior with designations of appropriate or inappropriate behavior rooted in structural inequality. And I was like, yeah. And I mean, I think that speaks to your point about how we're taught at a young age what's appropriate and what's not. If a kid does not sit down for an entire class period, which I think is like to be expected, they're kids, but then they get all these labels, they get in trouble, they're labeled as a troublemaker. Some teachers even send them outside the classroom, which actually does more harm because then they're outside the classroom.
Mm-hmm. And whenever we also look at traditional public schooling methods of discipline, none of that ever really helps. If you actually look at adolescent psychology and actually like take into account things happening not only inside of the classroom, outside of the classroom, as well as putting cops in schools.
Yeah.
Cops are not the answer. I'm gonna just, once again, we're putting that right here because there was a mass shooting today in New York City subway systems. I've been spending most of my day informing my people that I am okay and checking in on everyone else to see if they're okay. And what a lot of people are saying right now is that there is a $10 billion NYPD budget. There's over 3,500 cops in the subway systems, and someone was still able to get in there, release tear gas canisters, and shoot 10 people.
Wow. Yeah. Cops are certainly not the answer. That is a tragedy, to say the least.
Like, if like the mayor is putting cops on every single subway platform, that still happened.
Yeah, it's a blatant show that cops are not the answer. I was listening to Kendi's podcast, like older podcast. I just wasn't in the mental space to listen to them when they released. And so I'm so glad I waited because they were talking about the criminal justice reform and what that should look like. And the guest that he had on, she was just saying that, you know, people are going to come at you and they're going to be like, okay, this is not feasible. We need cops. We need all these things. And she was like, but it's not working. This system that we have, we're pouring more money into it and it's just not working. So what if we try something else? Something that didn't harm vulnerable populations.
Yep. Like, we already know that the police system has a racial bias history. And race trainings aren't going to fix police shootings.
No.
Like, you can do all of your DEI trainings that you want, but it's not going to fix a system that was built from slave patrols.
And do you know the race of the shooter?
There have been mixed reports. They still haven't apprehended him.
Okay. I was just
So
curious.
I don't want to say because I don't want to say what I've read because there have been no confirmed reports. Like, even like the number of injuries is still unconfirmed.
Okay.
But at least 10 people were shot, and like I want to say like 18 people in addition to that were like rushed to the hospital. It could have been something like spraining a leg, but like some of the photos from the train platforms were not great. So we'll see what happens the further along we get to that.
Yeah. Hopefully some rethinking and strategy.
Yeah, but it was in downtown Brooklyn, so it's a very diverse population down there. So
yeah,
not sure what's going to happen if and when the news gets a hold of this, because I always feel like, especially nowadays, whenever a tragedy like this happens, like race always comes in at some point. Yeah.
Always. there feels to be some rationalization, which I mean, I think this goes back to what we read last week, just the need to make people feel better. Oh, this is how I can keep myself safe. Oh, this is how we can prevent this from happening. But it's just not that simple.
Yeah. So my strategy today was I worked from home. You can see I am at my house and I ate some very disappointing fettuccine Alfredo for lunch.
Which turned into chips.
It turned into chips. I don't even care. Like it just, these kind of tragedies that happen just also make respectability politics like such another it makes respectability politics another thing, because once more identifying information does come out about the shooter, like people are going to start trying to rationalize what happened. And by rationalizing, it's going to accidentally demonize and generalize a population. Doesn't matter what population, we already just know that someone's going to try to generalize it, because that's how these things go.
Yeah. Yeah. Just all around not great.
It really isn't. Like, I love how Kendall also like talked about writing about Black women, but who is it that's writing about Black women? Like, have you ever seen those? I love to read books. We're in a book club, so I like reading. But I saw a tweet one time that was just like, if women wrote about men the way that men wrote about women, and it just went on to like put all of these like similes and metaphors about like men's genitalia. Because of the way that men will describe a woman's body in some books. And so whenever you think about like describing a man's body the way that a woman's body is described, you can be like, okay, that woman was written by a man. You can tell very often in movies, TV shows, what percentage of the script was written by a man, and if a woman is acting out whatever scene is ahead. Like, because you can see the way that the camera is framed, you can see the way that the woman acts, how she is not a three-dimensional like real life character, just a very one-dimensional, only has one goal. It's called the Bechdel test, where in movies, if there has to be two women on screen at the same time, they can't be talking about their love lives. And Bechdel test, I'm trying to remember, and it's like a majority of films and TV shows do not pass this.
Wow.
And I think it's a very easy test, like more than one woman on screen at a time talking about something that's not her love life.
Wow. Now that I think about it, I feel that's a majority of what I watch.
So if we apply that to race, how many women of color are written by women of color and not talking about something that is specifically quote unquote traditionally feminist, or being that woman of color? Like, what is it to see a normalized something that's just very normalized of like two women of color on screen talking about, my computer is messing up. Yeah, like you should like figure that out because like you have a degree in computer science or something. Just a very simple scene like that.
Right. A real scene. I wonder, can you tell the difference in when you read if the author is white, or if they're a white woman or a woman of color?
So I think modern fiction, because I also love fiction, I think modern fiction does a really good job, depending on the author, of like having more in-depth characters. But whenever it comes to race, in my head, and like it's really weird, in my head, the default character is always white.
For sure.
The character could be a freaking fantasy mermaid and she's still white to me.
So I think I read a good mix of fiction and nonfiction, but I can always tell if it's specifically a Black woman writing. I could just feel it in like the language. I don't know. I don't have many words to describe it, but I can always feel. And then whenever I read a book specifically written by a white woman, just by like the way things are said, the structure of it, the words that are chosen, I can almost automatically, probably within like the first chapter, tell like, okay, this is a white woman. It's just different for me.
It makes me think about how white authors, which are still a majority of males, most published authors are still dudes. What are we doing? But like whenever you read books and people not from a minority population are writing about minority populations, and you're sitting there going like, you are definitely 1000% playing into any stereotypes, like what Kendall mentioned in this chapter about like the Mammy Aunt Jemima caricatures, that the first book that that comes to mind for me is The Help, or at least the movie. I have the book sitting on my shelf, but the movie, how it's definitely framed from the perspective of a white protagonist, and that the Black women in this movie, the characters, are supporting roles.
Yeah, it certainly plays a difference. What you're getting at is something that I'm seeing from my Balanced Black Girl podcast, which I love. They just talk about how you're like missing there for as long as time. There's been like this missing of the development of a Black girl to a woman. It's just like woman, right? But there is a development. We do have conversations about like our computer or like what we're buying from the grocery store. Like we are humans. And so I think this is an interesting point you're bringing up, because if we can like, I think there's a little more representation now. There's a little more accessibility in terms of, I mean, there are so many books written by people in my local community. I'm like, oh, I'm so excited to read that and really connect with it. I feel like there's more of that, which is really exciting.
There is a book that I'm currently reading called This Poison Heart, which focuses on a Black adoptee who has the magical abilities to talk to plants. My dream,
Yes. How is this book?
I am about a third of the way through it, but what I did love was, I don't want to misrepresent the author or spoil the book either, so I'm going to look it up really quick to see if the author is in fact Black. But just the way that like the author would mention the main character's like morning routine, and just casually incorporate, please correct me if I am wrong, getting there's a specific way that you lay your hair a specific way. I'm so sorry. I'm like,
oh, it's okay. Yeah, you wrap it. It's fine.
Yeah. So I'm just like, okay, that is awesome. The author didn't just like throw aside like, oh, they brushed their hair.
Got you.
Like,
and it's the tiny details like that maybe we wouldn't even recognize if we weren't able to contrast like, oh, this was actually written by somebody who has actually wrapped their hair before, as opposed to someone who like thinks they know what it's like to be a Black or brown woman.
Yeah. Okay. So the author, oh my goodness, is a Kaylin Barron is a creative arts enthusiast, wife, and mother of 4 who lives in Colorado Springs. And she does appear to be a woman of color.
Okay.
Ta-da! I don't know if you can see that.
Oh Yeah.
And the sequel is coming out this year. So I'm just like,
I'm glad you're liking it. It certainly makes a difference. I think that speaks to how everything is elevated when people have equal opportunities. When we can read books written by, I mean, I still read books written by white women, but for the most part, I read books written by Black and brown women.
I will be the first to admit that I am such a fan of Bridgerton, the books and the show. Okay. I love the books. The books are written about the English aristocracy, first of all, and so my dream has always been to be rich and British. But like the difference between the books and the TV show, first of all, Shonda Rhimes got a hold of it. So made it dramatic, like Grey's Anatomy dramatic. And I don't want to like steal this term or whatever, but they Hamiltonized the cast.
Interesting. Okay.
I saw that term somewhere where they just cast whoever was best for the role, regardless of color. And this season, so the first season, the main love interest was Black. And this season, the main love interest was South Asian.
Okay.
And the way that they incorporated the South Asian culture of that character's region, specifically into just small little details like their morning routine, stuff like that. And I remember reading an article just being like, "That's awesome."
It is. I remember I was in theater in high school, and like one of the big things was typecasting and people being caught in these boxes. And I mean, our program, they were trying to prepare people for a career in theater because that's what happens. But I love that they're Hamiltonizing because so much comes from it. You can learn so much about a Southeastern culture from this person who portrays them.
Like another one of my favorite TV writers, Mindy Kaling. Yeah. Love Mindy. Just does like in her latest series, Never Have I Ever. It's about a South Asian family, and the daughter is going through high school, but it's like a culmination of like seeing their home life plus their life at school in a typical high school, you know, and going through being a teenager and things like that. And just how beautifully like culture and family is and being a woman is written in this show. I'm just like, have more female writers.
Everything is just elevated when that happens. It sounds amazing.
And it's just like, yeah, go watch it on Netflix. Go watch Netflix. Yeah. If you need a password, hit me up. It's just like whenever people ask like, where are all the women writers? I'm just like, oh, hello. Women couldn't get their own bank accounts until like 100 years ago, or vote, or live alone.
Yeah. It's equivalent to being like, oh, but there's not women of talent like in writing, and that's not true. They're everywhere. The question is, are you just stuck in your own circle where you don't have the opportunity to see what people are doing? Because I could think like off the top of my head of like 3 women authors who I love, and there are so many more out there who, and I mean, you think about like this next generation coming up, there are more writers, there are more people, and we can make it even more diverse and even better.
Love it. And I love like the idea of like being able to represent yourself and seeing yourself represented, not only through art, but also just in more everyday life scenarios. Like, yeah, that would be awesome. I also like saw some like Asians on Bridgerton, and I was like, yeah, I see some East Asians. I see you over there. I would have never imagined myself in a pretty Pride and Prejudice dress, like doing all those cute little country dances and speaking with a British accent. But I can dream about that now. Yay.
It makes a difference. Representation, it makes a difference.
Exactly. It really does. Whew. So between that and you're pretty for a ... So
Mhm.
happy that Kendall left it at ...
I thought she was going to go more into it as the chapter went on, but she did not, like, not more into what we're thinking the ending absolutely probably was. She goes in a different direction, which I am thankful for.
I absolutely love it. Did anything specific about this chapter really stand out for you?
She talked a lot about colorism, and specifically, she goes into the statistics of how colorism plays a role in quality of life for darker skinned people. And we've talked about colorism before, but and totally my privilege of not being a darker skinned person, I'm just going to read this because it shocked me.
Go for it.
Having darker skin is linked to lower job prospects, difficulty getting promoted into high level positions, lower marriage rates, higher rates of arrest, and longer prison terms. That's quality of life. And so that definitely stuck out to me within this. Was there anything that stuck out to you?
Like, I think the correlation of pretty people privilege, PPP, pretty people privilege, of pretty people privilege, as well as white Western beauty standards being the hallmark, like skinny blonde hair, blue-eyed girl. Like, one of my absolute best friends in high school was this gorgeous, like, blonde hair, blue-eyed girl. Was on the cross country team. So, like, I just remember how many guys just wanted to ask her out, and just being like, well, that's something I'm never going to be, because first of all, look at me. I can dye my hair blonde. It's not gonna look great. I dye it red now, kind of, but like,
we know what you mean though.
but like, internalizing that I'm never going to look like that, and like, how often, tying back into the how to write a Black woman chapter, how tying back into that, like, how many young women not seeing themselves represented will internalize, okay, this is an unattainable standard. And then that not only affects like their way of viewing themselves, but it also affects their quality of life by the way that they project themselves after internalizing something that they can't attain.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, I think Kendall talks about, what does she talk about? She talks about how, I'm going to come back to this point because I forgot. But anyway, I really appreciate that you brought that up, because, and she definitely talks about how just loving a body, a skin color, a hair type that's not the norm, the quote unquote norm, what we've been told to really love, then that's a form of revolution. That's a form of just like going against the norm, because for the very same reason you just said, like, we were told that this is beautiful, and to be able to see something outside of that as beautiful that's growth on our part, and it's fantastic.
Like, Kendall says, like, there's a narrative that because Black women consistently report having higher self-esteem than white or Latina women, that means that they don't need the care or concern around beauty that other women do. But that higher level of self-esteem is built across time inside our communities, and not every girl gets the support that she needs to combat a culture that says her body is always going to be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. That just speaks to the importance of like being surrounded by your people. And like she said, everyone doesn't have the privilege of that.
Like, it makes me think so deeply about my transracial adoption community, and about myself, as well as like my own family members who are also transracial adoptees, not having a racial mirror So being surrounded by whiteness and seeing that as an internalized beauty standard, but also seeing it in our homes too. Like, I'm not saying I was trying to escape my family, but there, in terms of like, for like seeing what can beautiful look like, there was no escape, and there was no seeing that. So if I didn't know who like Sandra Oh was from Grey's Anatomy as a kid, and if I didn't see like Tina Cohen Chang on Glee whenever I was in high school, and Mulan was a cartoon, but like
But still.
If I had not seen that, I can't imagine like where my head would have been. And honestly, like those are only 3 people.
Yeah.
Those are only 3 people in comparison to the plethora of white people in the media.
Yes. It reminds me of Nicole Chong and her fantastic book that we got the opportunity to read. And she talks, when she was talking about going to the store and they would go to the market and they'd see like Asian women, and she was just so enamored because she, like you said, there was no cultural mirror in her house. It plays a big role. I think it might be slept on, especially for people who are privileged to have that cultural mirror, but it's important.
Yeah, like I love also how diverse Disney and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm also a huge Marvel fan, so yeah. Marvel, Star Wars, Disney, they own my soul at this point. It's fine. But how diverse they have been getting in recent years in their storytelling, in the makeup of their definition of family, their definition of what love can look like, and showing that in different ways on a huge major film production.
Yeah, it just reinforces how important it is that they're doing the right thing, which is really nice, that they're evolving with us. That's really cool because it's important. And people who say it's not important are too privileged to understand why it's important.
When we're still having to, once again, in the year of our Lord 2022, having to read a book that was published like, what was it? When was this published? 2020?
Probably not too long ago.
I think it was 2020. Anyways, when this was 2020.
Wow.
When this book was published in 2020 and a chapter is titled "You're Pretty for a ... I can guarantee you we have not come far enough, because I have still heard that at bars.
Wow. Yeah. And just in case people don't understand, it's not a compliment to be told you're pretty for, and then insert. We can't even say it. That's how awful it is. It's not a compliment at the expense of your race, your gender, like whatever you're going to fill that blank with. It's not a compliment.
Like if someone were to come up to me and say, oh, you're pretty for, I'm just going to say it, you're pretty for an Asian. And I'm going to be like, cool. So do you want me to throw my entire race under the bus for a compliment and opinion of one idiot? And it's going to be at a bar, probably in the Lower East Side. So it's probably an idiot anyways.
It's not a compliment. It's concerning that people are still hearing that. You can just be pretty. That's fantastic. That's sweet.
It's like saying, oh, you're pretty for a human. And I'm like, all right, just insult the entire human race on that. Like, what would you like rather? What do you do with that?
Yeah. Speaking of compliments that aren't really compliments, Mikki definitely talks about how at her job she got not harassed, but she got some unwanted attention. And when she would talk to people about it, superiors, HR, they would be like, oh, well, but like you're supposed to be flattered. And it's just an interesting foundation that people think if you get, and this has always really shocked me, if you get hit on, if you get a compliment, you're automatically supposed to be flattered.
Nope. Context matters, people. If
Mhm.
it's a creepy person hitting on me, I'm not going to take that as a compliment. I'm going to take it as a, okay, I'm going to make sure you don't put anything in my drink.
It's we don't live for compliments from men. I don't know why that's why that's what people think, but that is not our sole purpose in life.
I love that, like, this entire book is talking about race and feminism, because it's just like, yeah, it's so sorely needed, because obviously people just need to get it around their brains that you can be both feminist and anti-racist, but by the other side of that coin, unfortunately, you can be a racist and sexist.
Yes. But you can't be feminist and racist.
No. Your feminism has to include anti-racism and intersectionality, or else it's not true feminism.
Yeah.
And that's the entire purpose of this book.
Yes. And she's doing a fantastic job. I mean, I love every chapter of this. These chapters weren't as like hard hitting, like in terms of, oh my gosh, I need to do better. Like these are things that I know, but still learned a lot.
Like, these chapters were very validating for me. They were more of a, okay, this isn't going to like it's not going to hit you so hard that you just need to go and cry in a corner for a little bit, but this is going to validate some of the experiences that you have already been through, and this is like a nice little soothing pat on the back.
Yes.
Or rubbing circles on your back. I'm doing that.
Yeah, I agree. This is very comforting.
So we are halfway through the book. And our next chapter, titled Black Girls Don't Have Eating Disorders.
Wow.
It's a loaded statement, and I'm sure Kendall is going to take it in a direction we do not expect.
That's going to be interesting.
And then the fetishization of fierce.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow.
All right.
Loaded chapters.
All right. Dang. There's a crash in the background.
And that is Hood Feminism by Mikki Kendall.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I'm excited for next week. I'm excited for the fact that we just talked through so many things that, once again, was very validating for me. I feel like I have double therapy on Tuesdays because I get to come here and talk with you about the issues just absolutely plaguing our society.
Yeah, I was telling you, like, it definitely feels nice after recording the podcast. It's like, okay, I got all that stuff off my chest.
It's cleansing. And then strangers get to listen to it on the internet.
I know. People choose to listen to us. How fantastic is that?
Our episodes last week got over 50 downloads. So,
man, shout out to you guys. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with us, because we are figuring it out.
It's fun. And thank you for listening to me go, like every 30 seconds.
Okay, one more thing, and then we can totally wrap up. I saw this, I think it was a tweet, and it was like, now I understand why a rooster screams all day. And I was like, I don't know why I didn't send that to you, but I like instantly thought of you.
Yep. I also tweeted the other day, I was just like, can my deep breathing exercises also include just screaming into a void? I saw this product the other day that it's marketed to opera singers, but it's basically a cone that you put over your mouth and just like belt into.
That's fantastic.
And it is developed for like New York City performers so that they can belt as loud as they want, because we all live on top of each other. But if I could just have one of those to just scream, that would be great.
So you heard it here. If you can find one of those, send them to Hannah and you will be forever her friend.
Yes. Well, thank you. As always, you are amazing and I appreciate you deeply.
Thank you so much. You give me way too much credit. You're also fantastic. And I have so much fun on this platform with you.
Oh, yay. I'll see you next time.
Bye.
Wow.